Hi, everybody. Welcome to the headlines. I'm Juliana Forlano. Professor Richard Wolff is going to join us. We're talking about how Charlie Munger made an ominous warning about the coming doom in the economy, about what the economic impact of Russian sanctions are going to be, and how the rent everywhere is too damn high. Joining me in this edition of the headlines will be Professor Richard Wolff. Here it comes. Hello, Professor Wolff. How do you like the image? We've
Beautiful.
Got the Wolf of Wall Street here.
Just beautiful. I'll have to start wearing a tie.
We are we stole from the Wolf of, well, I didn't make it. Someone on someone's team. Do you know where this came from, Professor Wolff?
No, I've not seen this, but increasingly these things are coming to me by people creatively doing all manner of things.
The Wolf of Main Street, a takeoff on the Wolf of Wall Street. Obviously, we are speaking with Professor and economist Richard Wolff. Okay, let's get right into the headlines. First up, Charlie Munger, the major investor, partner to Warren Buffett in Berkshire Hathaway, and a man probably pretty far away from you on the ideological spectrum, put out a video yesterday suggesting that terrible times are ahead for our economy and that most people have no idea what is coming. You and I recently had a chat, and you told me that in the circles where you travel, economists from every different ideological zone are saying that we are in a very precarious situation and that no one can really see a way out. I'm going to play a snippet of Charlie's video, and then I want your unfiltered opinion of what he's saying and your thoughts about what's happening. Let's hit the Charlie video.
We're in a big bubble. Can you elaborate on that, and how is this likely to play out?
When you print money on the scale that modern nations are printing it, Japan, the United States, Europe, etc., we're getting into new territory in terms of size. There's never been anything quite like what we're doing now, and we do know from what's happened in other nations, if you try and print too much money, it eventually causes terrible trouble. And we're closer to terrible trouble than we've been in the past, but it may still be a long way off. I certainly hope so. When Volcker, after the 70s, took the prime rate to 20% and the government was paying 15% on its government bonds, that was a horrible recession. Lasted a long time, caused a lot of agony. And I certainly hope we're not going there again. I think the conditions that allowed Volcker to do that without an interference from the politicians were very unusual. And I think in 2020 hindsight, it was a good thing that he did it. I would not predict that our modern politicians will be as willing to permit a new Volcker to get that tough with the economy and bring on that kind of a recession. So I think the new troubles are likely to be different from the old troubles. You may wish you had a Volcker-style recession instead of what you're going to get. The troubles that come to us could be worse than what Volcker was dealing with and harder to fix. Think of all the Latin American countries that print too much money. They get strongmen and so forth. That's what Plato said happened in the early Greek city-state democracies. One person, one vote, a lot of equality, and you get demagogues, and the demagogues lather up the population, and pretty soon you don't have your democracy anymore. I don't think that was a crazy idea on Plato's part. I think that accurately described what happened in Greece way back then, and it's happened again and again and again in Latin America. We don't want to go there. At least I don't. We've done something pretty extreme, and we don't know how bad the troubles will be, whether we're going to be like Japan or something a lot worse. And what makes life interesting is we don't know how it's going to work out. I think we do know we're flirting with serious trouble. I think we also know that some of our earlier fears were overblown.
And some were not. Professor Wolff, your thoughts on the doomsaying and what you've been hearing in the circles you travel?
Well, let me start off by saying, and I mean no disrespect, I really don't, that Charlie Munger in this video and in other things he said proves once again that if you're rich, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're smart. To repeat,
I mean no disrespect, but I'm just saying.
right? Yes, that's how it's done.
Yes, yes, very
Look,
good.
he says over and over again, we're heading for trouble. He's right. He says over and over again, it's because we're printing a lot of money. Well, that's silly. Here's why it's silly. We've been printing money for the last umpteen years now on a record scale, and we haven't had an inflation and we haven't had a collapse. Number one. Number two, even if you believe there's some sort of link between printing money and a collapse, you then only have to ask the obvious question: why are people who know the history just as well as Charlie Munger not asking and answering the question, why are they printing money like this if it leads you into trouble? I mean, the obvious question is what's going on in a system, whether it's ancient Greece and Plato or Latin America or the United States. And I should point out, we're printing money at a rate that exceeds what has happened in Latin America or ancient Greece right now. So I agree, yeah, we're headed for trouble. We're already in trouble. But the notion that we can all think about it in terms of the printing of money, I mean, that's a bizarre, narrow basis on which to conduct any kind of analysis.
So the trouble that we're in has less to do with the fact that we're printing lots of money and more to do with what?
Well, for example, we have unspeakable level of inequality in our society. For 20 years, we've been giving all of the growth of wealth to the top 1% of the population and making the rest of this country staring at a disappearing American dream, at a handful of people who regale us with spending unspeakable amounts of money in order to have 11 minutes in space for an afternoon. I mean, we are watching something that isn't so far away from the ancient pharaohs, and the spectacles they gave to people. So if I were this Charlie Munger, I'd be saying not so much printing money, but the obscene inequality that we're producing is a much more dangerous trouble that we're heading into.
Yeah, they weren't. So the people that you're speaking to who are all agreed that we're heading into trouble of whatever ideology, they're just thinking of different ways we're heading into trouble. No one's all in agreement that it's the inequality that's the problem, or?
That's right. They don't agree on how we got into this situation, and they don't agree on how we ought to get out of it. But it's already interesting, I think, that people as different, and you're right about that, Juliana, people as different as Charlie Munger and myself would be agreeing that we're in dangerous territory, that troubles are coming, that our politicians don't have whatever it is they had back then with when Martin was the head of the Fed and so on. These are correct observations that we're in deep trouble. But when I listen to how they explain how we got there, that's kind of silly at this point. That's their ideology. They want to blame the government. They never want to blame a capitalist economic system, the inequality it generates, the instability of these cycles that come every few years. They never want to talk about that. They want to talk about the bad government, the bad policy of the bad politicians. It's a cheap out. And it indicates that they don't want to take the question.
Oh, they've been making a lot of financial success off of the system that we already have. So I doubt they'd want to upend the apple cart that provides them their apples.
Right. But then the risk is they're having a wonderful time. The economy is hollowing out underneath them. And then when it crashes, they're going to take us all down with them. That's why we have to develop our own analysis and our own program to deal with this. We rely on them. They're showing us that's a mistake.
I love having you on the program because, people just are aware. People in the street are aware that things are not right. You've got your inflation, you've got your potential war, and that's going to lead us to our next story. And just knowing that when you come on, you give a reality check to people who are like, yeah, this is not right, and this is not just me. So I appreciate that. The second story I wanted to hit today is the bipartisan effort to have Biden impose crippling sanctions on Moscow in the hopes it'll stop his likely attack on Ukraine, which looks like it's already in progress. What Biden is out there announcing it right now as we speak. What boomerang effect do you think if we get to sanctions? What do you think they'll have here at home and around the world?
Okay, let me comment on two levels, if you may, if you allow it, Juliana.
Please.
Number one, the sanctions. This is 75% political theater for the United States. Sanctions don't work. We have been sanctioning Russia, just to remind everyone, since 2014. That's 8 years ago. We hit them with all kinds of sanctions. So did our pet poodle, the United Kingdom. They did it too, had even less effect than the Americans. It was punishment for the Russians invading Crimea, that strip of land that goes in, gives them access to the Mediterranean and so on. What did those sanctions accomplish? Did the Russians leave Crimea? Absolutely not. Did the Russians stop their program of trying to get security, which is what they claim they're after, by having a friendly environment on their borders? No. And that's why we're in the pickle we're in now. The idea that sanctions today will do what sanctions have never done, especially in recent time, makes me wonder what kind of political theater this is.
Go ahead.
Number two, the United States in the last 20 years twice went thousands of miles beyond its border, invading Afghanistan, invading Iraq on the grounds that their security was threatened. Nobody in their right mind believed that, except here, since you don't have to go to two of the poorest countries on earth if you're the richest and the most powerful to protect your security. But that's what the United States said, and that's what the world accepted. You know why? Because the United States could do that. Here is Russia, and I have no brief for Russia. They deserve all kinds of criticisms. But here is Russia right on its own border, not having to airlift its troops anywhere, saying a bunch of stuff about its own security and wanting to move. We are not the country in a position to talk about how horrible that is, because we just did that and we're still not done with it.
Yeah.
Now, as to the effects. Here's the immediate effect. The price of oil is going to shoot up. And you know what that's going to mean? That the people in California who are already spending over $5 a gallon to fill up their cars are going to be spending a good bit more. And so are we in the rest of the world. Europe is going to have to scramble where to get the energy, which is already driving an inflation. Britain's inflation is 7.8%. Ours is currently 7.5%. All of those inflationary numbers are being given a boost by all of the disruption that will follow sanctions. And then let's remember, the Russians have counter sanctions. They did after 2014. There's no reason to expect they won't do that again. They are one of the largest players in the global oil market. And here's an irony. Because the price of oil goes up, and because Russia's economy depends on exporting oil and gas, the irony is the trouble caused here by the exchange of sanctions drives up the price, which makes the economic cost to Russia less by the minute as the price of oil goes up. And therefore, they have that in their planning, that this is a move which, without sanctions, they can afford. You put it all together, this is a cheap theatric to distract Americans from Mr. Biden's political problems at home and to distract the people of England from the absurd chaos of the Boris Johnson clown government that they have.
It does seem that, well, we already have the inflation sans the cutting off of fossil fuels. Uh, uh, I mean, just to draw the lines, of course, if oil goes up, the price of food goes up. The price of anything you have to have delivered goes up. The price of everything goes up. So, we're cold here in the Northwest, or excuse me, Northeast. Right now, the price of heating your home will go up. That is I've said a million times, Professor Wolff, if we had a green energy economy, we could avoid a lot of these wars.
That's right. And the irony, let me give you one irony just to underscore your point. Amazon has a service called Amazon Prime. If you give them a bunch of money every year, they'll deliver all this stuff to you, whether you need it or not, that they've been able to get you to buy. They raised the price this year from $119 to $139. It's a wonderful thing because it's an increase of 20%. Right, or nearly so, way more than the rise of inflation. And that, of course, that's being passed on to you, this inflation, with a little extra for Amazon, because they needed having a billionaire CEOs and making more money last year than anyone else. If a company as well positioned as they are is using the situation to jack up prices, imagine what your neighborhood business is being forced to do as they cope with all of this.
And it's like a sneaky thing that they do, right? Because you pay that at the beginning of the year, and then you think when you're about to buy something from eBay, you're like, yeah, but I already paid at Amazon the shipping. So, and then they call it free shipping with Prime. You've already paid the shipping. You prepay the ship anyway. It's just like, are we dumb? They always think that people are so stupid. Anyway, so here's the question. Back to your idea about, or your thoughts about political theater. I had the same thoughts, that it's just basically like, well, we have to pretend we're doing sanctions because what we really want to do is prop up and give some money to the military industrial complex. And, war is very lucrative for some segments of this economy. What effect would actual war have on our economy? Would it prop it up?
Well, in other countries, you could say something in answer, well, the war will stimulate. But we've been running a war-based economy, whether we have a war or not. After the Soviet Union imploded in 1989, there was loose talk about a peace dividend, right? The idea was, now that we don't have a superpower, Russia, aimed against us, we can take it easy. We can the defense industry went crazy. We immediately had a war on terror, which would last how long? Forever. I mean, it's the ultimate dream of the defense industry. So we can't say that a war will mean more orders. It will, but they're already getting more orders than they know what to do with. Our expenditure on defense and defense-related issues is already over $1 trillion, which is a staggering proportion of our tax revenue and everything else. Will some more happen? Yes, but I think that will be
Oh, you're frozen a little bit, Professor Wolff. Are you still there? Can you still hear me?
Lost to us in higher oil and gas prices, higher food prices.
Professor Wolff, you're freezing on me a little tiny bit. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, great. You froze
Yes,
on me
I
just a tiny bit. But this is kind of a tough line to walk for people on the left or people who are anti-war, whatever party I can't see belonging to one. Anyway, I can't see belonging to one party and being anti-war when half of those candidates are pro-war, mostly hawks and whatnot. Anyway, it's tough to walk the line. You have to respond proportionally and try to deter without escalating insofar as that's possible. You think this is basically just political theater so Biden can say, I've done everything I can, and now let's send in the troops?
I don't think he's going to send in the troops. It's beyond words to me. To be honest, my expectation is that this will go away exactly like the activities around Crimea did. And that's not because of Mr. Biden. I don't want to blame him. The United States is not in the position it once was. It doesn't call the shots around the world the way it once did. Russia has a close alliance now with China. You put those two countries together, they have 5 times the population of the United States. And because of China, they have the latest technology across the board. You're in a new world, and the United States will huff and it will puff. But those little piggies have got a brick house, and it ain't going to blow over anytime soon. And everyone in the world knows that you could not sustain with the American public a costly war for a Ukraine that the majority of Americans could not locate on a map. That's how little they care. And you know something, given the history, given what's plaguing and troubling the American people now, I have no criticism. Ukraine is the last thing they want to worry about. And Mr. Biden, therefore, has to ratchet up the theater, because it's a theater that's all, you know, a painted backdrop. Behind that, nothing.
Very interesting. So just retouching on that one question, if you answered it, but I want to give you opportunity if you wanted to expand. If there are sanctions, which I'm guessing there are by now, it's 225. He was announcing them at 2. How is that going to ripple? You're saying the major ripple effect of that is going to be seeing an increase in fossil fuel costs, and then the ripple effect of that, meaning the cost of our groceries are going to be higher, the cost of everything else is going to be higher.
It's a little hard this early to say, because it depends on how much the theater is going to require Mr. Biden, because you can expect he'll be criticized for whatever sanctions he puts in, that they're not enough. Then we have to guess at what the Russian response will be, what kind of...
Oh, you're a little bit frozen, just a little bit frozen.
Of the so-called supply chains all across the board.
We're already having problems with supply chains, and now we're having problem with your video. I'm sorry to say. I think you may have gotten kicked out, and I'm not sure if he's going to come back in. Giancarlo, oh, there he is. Hi, you're back.
Yes.
Oh,
sorry about it. You know, I'm not having any trouble that I can see here, but
no worries. I'm sure it's the man who doesn't want us talking about these things and telling people what's really going on. Moving to our last story before you get completely shut out of the process here. Rent is out of control. You've got an article. This is out of Florida. Rents are reaching insane levels across the U.S. with no end in sight. Can you talk about what is going on there? And, you know, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I mean, the best way I can think of to explain this to people is we live in a society which celebrates markets as if they were some gift from God as an institution. Well, markets cut both ways. You know, it's like a sharp knife. For certain purposes, it's a great thing to have. For other purposes, it could kill you. And markets are exactly the same way. Markets in the current situation are governed by a rule, and that rule is charge as much as you can get away with. Or if you like, raise the price as high as the market will bear. That's how we teach it in economics courses. Well, what do we have now? We have small landlords across the country who've just been through a very hard 2 years of economic crash, pandemic, all the rest. They weren't able to raise their rents then. They were barely able to collect them. They couldn't evict people. They couldn't threaten people with evictions. So they've taken it on the chin. Now they can catch up. And they're raising their rents to catch up to whatever it is that they had to go through for 2.5 years. Number one. Number two.
But who's left to rent at these high rates? I mean, this woman that's pictured had to move in with a boyfriend. Like who? That's
the result. You are squeezing the American working class. People should understand that when you raise the rents higher than the rate of inflation is being raised, you know, prices in general, you're just moving wealth. You're moving wealth out of the accounts of renters into the accounts of landlords. It's an enormous shift in the distribution of wealth. It's part of what's going on across the United States capitalistic economy, in which the rich are getting richer and the poor are having to live with their mother, their grandfather, their cousin, their aunt, because afford the rents.
I was wondering
either
about this.
You let this go or you don't. How would you avoid it? Build, if the private profit isn't there, the government builds the housing. There's no great difficulty in this. You just have to make the political decision to do it, which our Democratic and Republican parties will not do.
That's interesting. We had some feedback when I announced what we were talking about on the show today on Twitter, talking about rent control and if that's actually a real answer. The tweet itself was, by disincentivizing would-be landlords from buying rental properties, they'll be likely bought back by banks and Blackstone et al. Will it be okay as mom and pop landlords and Blackstone fail to make repairs due to high costs, due to rent control? Have we thought rent control through? But you're not suggesting rent control. You're suggesting a competition in the market brought by the government bringing in housing. Is that right? Oh, you maybe can't see me anymore.
I can hear you and see you now.
Oh, great. We can see you too. The
can.
question I had, I don't know, were you able to hear the question about rent control?
No, not about rent control.
Oh, okay. So just briefly, one of the questions that came in was about rent control and how it's not exactly the answer. But you're not proposing rent control. What you're proposing is a competition by government housing to the regular housing market. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. That's what other countries have done. That's what the United States has done in its past.
So in order to keep renters.
Yeah, the only amazing thing is that Americans seem to be allowing the political system we have simply to rule out certain options as if they weren't there. I mean, I can give you a couple of examples. Over the last 2 years, we've had unbelievable unemployment. We could have solved it by having the government hire people. Then they wouldn't have had to be unemployed. We would have gotten the output they could have helped to create. We could have therefore paid them a proper salary. They wouldn't have lost their homes. They wouldn't have had to stop paying their landlords the rent that was owed. We could have had a different solution if you had allowed the government to play a role here to fix this system. We are ideologically opposed, and the result is we don't have even a discussion about these options as if they weren't there. And that's a loss for the American people.
Right. And we allow the right to take over with this discussion as if rent control is the only thing that the left is proposing. We'll have to talk more about this later, Professor Wolff, because we're out of town. My next guest is here. I do thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you joining me on these headlines. Everyone needs to go watch Economic Update on YouTube. You can go to Democracy at Work on the internet. Support Professor Wolff's work. Thank you again for coming on the program with me.
Thank you, Juliana. Sorry for whatever these interruptions were.
Not a problem. I appreciate you coming on. Any word you say is worth its weight in gold. So thank you so much.
You're very kind. Thank you.